Hello.
Hello. Yes. Good evening, ma'am. May I start?
Sure.
Okay. So, good evening to everyone. Kolkata Bidhannagar Society for Academic Advancement has organized a lecture series program for undergraduate commerce student semester 5. We are on day 2. Today's our topic in commodity market and money market equilibrium. And our respected faculty Dr. Swati Chakraborty madam. Dr. Swati Chakraborty presently working as a professor in the Department of Business, Royal Thimphu College, Bhutan. She is from Kolkata, India. She topped the examination for her BSc in economics and earned an MSc in economics with specialization in international economics from Calcutta University. She holds an MBA with a specialization in operation management, a graduate diploma in operation research from Operational Research Society of India, and a PhD in Quality Assurance Management, Calcutta University. In addition, she is pursuing a postdoctoral program. She has 22 years of experience in industry and academic. She served as a project research assistant with Shore Car and Associates for 7 years and the lecturer with Allahabad University Offshore Campus in Calcutta for another 2 years. She also worked as a senior lecturer for BBA and MBA students at Garden City College in Bangalore for 5 years. She has 25 publications in national and international journals. She is also the author of 8 books and 4 edited books. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Raunak, for that wonderful introduction. Uh, good evening to everyone who's present up here. So, let me start. Like as Raunak has already said, the topic for today is commodity and money market. Raunak, if you could please start sharing the slide, please. Yes. Okay. So now when we actually start, let me just give a brief background for this, like when we talk of commodity and money market, how does this come into play? So actually, like when we talk of economics, initial economics theory came from the classical economists who had to say that supply creates its own demand. That is, whatever is will be produced will be sold, there will be sold, that there will be demand, which means, you know what they were actually talking about, they were talking about full employment, that to give employment to the people in the economy, so it was easy as per that theory, and so people could be employed, and then they can increase the production with the belief that whatever will be produced will be sold. Now, this theory was working till the Great Depression, that is in the 1930s, when things didn't work out. Then the theory started failing, and that's when the concept of that's when Keynes came up with his theory. That then when he said that his idea was that unemployment will be there, it's you cannot have full employment, and that's the time when he emphasized on classical economists was emphasizing on the supply side economics. So Keynes, for the first time, started talking about demand side economics, that production will happen based on demand. It's not the other way around. That first there is the production, and that production, whatever production is happening, means there will be demand. It will be sold. It's not that. It's the other way around. That whenever whatever is the demand, according to it, the production will be made, and which means that demand varies. So if accordingly the number of laborers in employed to do the job will also vary. If the demand decreases, there'll be less the amount of laborers involved, so unemployment will happen. So that's where the concept came up. So that's how it came up. And so then he actually started analyzing the situation more in details with the help of commodity and goods market, or the, as we say, commodity market and money market. And then he spoke and he explained in details about it. So in this lecture, it's divided into four parts. The first part, I'll just go into details with it, where I'll be talking a little on the background of whatever I just said on the Keynesian economics, and then going into goods market. The second part talks about the IS model, from the goods market, how the IS model comes in, and then we talk of the money market, and from there we talk of the LM curve, how the LM curve is derived, and finally we will talk of the ISLM model, which is the equilibrium condition in the goods, when we take both the goods and money market into consideration, and then we talk of the fiscal and monetary policy. So can we actually go to the second slide, please? If we could, second slide, please. Yes. So this is that's what Keynes, like his theory, like he had the theory. His theory came the general theory of employment, interest, and money. That's what exactly I was trying to say. That it happened during the Great Depression. That's when he started talking about it. Slide, next slide, please. Slide 3. So, according to Keynes, what he had to say was that whenever there's an increase in demand, that would obviously lead to an increase in production. Now, production means which would ultimately lead to an increase in income. Now, what happens is what will be the total amount of like initial, and this is the process which goes on: more income, more consumption, more production, more income. So more that's how the process goes on, and the end result is that for an initial increase in output, say increase in output by 1 unit, that would actually lead to a huge amount of increase in the ultimate demand, ultimate income. So that's how much is that. That's the extent of increase in that final income. That is what we called is multiplier, as we say, Keynesian multiplier coming into play. uh Next slide, please. Okay. So Keynes, this is just what I was talking to you at the very beginning, that initially when we had the classical economists talking about full employment, but what happens is, like, Keynes had to say that, like, the businesses, they will employ workers to produce goods, like, only when there is demand. They will not hire. Nobody hires people when there's no demand for it, and that's why unemployment comes into play. So unemployment happens because as a result of insufficient demand for goods and services. So that's why Keynesian economics highlights or stresses on the demand side economics. And it's basically talking about on the short run economic fluctuations. Next slide, please. Can we have the next slide? Yes. So let's start with, as I said, the first part is where we talk of the goods market. Now, when we talk the things that we're going to talk of, we will talk about the goods market means the GDP coming into play, the composition of GDP, and then how to determine the equilibrium output, and finally the IS curve from the goods market. Now, next slide, please. So, in the goods market, as per Keynes, he makes three basic assumptions. The first thing that he said, that all firms produce same products, same means identical products which can be consumed by all the sectors of an economy. That's first thing. Second assumption was that all firms are willing to supply goods at any given price. So, any given price, that is where we are talking of a perfect competition. And the price is given in the market. firms are price takers. They are not price makers. That's the assumption that is there. They're willing to supply goods at any given price. And the third that comes up is we are talking of a closed economy. Closed economy means there is no trade happening, no exports, no imports. So, given such a situation, so let us first see what are the different composition of the GDP. Like, next slide, please. uh, Slide 7. Yes. So first and foremost, now how do we, like, when we talk of the income, like how does the income come about, from where do we have the income coming from, or how does the, let's put it that way, the income that the producers are earning, so getting, so there will be, it's because there's a demand, that's why production is happening. So demand is coming from which, from what are the sources? The first is from the consumers. They consume goods and services. So that's what, where we talk about is consumption, which is denoted by capital C. The next comes up is investment, or as we say, fixed investment, which is where we are talking of the capital goods. So which is a sum total of the non-residential investment and residential investment, and this is denoted by capital I. Next slide, please. Okay. So third component is government. G, government spending. Government spending, that is government spending on goods and services. But one has to remember it does not include any government transfers, nor any interest payments on government debt. That is not included. Only it talks about government spending, government expenditure on goods and services. Now, what we also have as per our GDP is also the imports and the exports. Imports is what a country purchases from another country, from foreign country, the goods and services that they purchase. It could be purchased by consumers, by firms, by the government as a whole. And exports is what we, when we talk about what is being sold, what is being sold to to foreign countries. So that's what it is. Now, and the net exports, that is export minus import, that is net exports, is also called the trade balance. uh can we go to slide 10? Okay. So now, if you look into the equation now, what happens is demand for goods is Z, denoted by Z, which is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus IM. Now, since Keynesian economists assume that it's a closed economy, that means net exports is zero. That is X minus IM is zero. So the Keynesian economic, under Keynesian economics, the equation, the total demand Z is equal to C plus I plus G. Now let's go into more details about when we talk about the consumption pattern. How does it work along with? Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So consumption is what, when we consume, that is not the income that we get on hand. We do not, what we get at the end of the month, the salary, we do not just spend on that way. What happens? We get our income, the salary that we get, that is the gross income. From there, all the necessary deductions are made, including, like, it's deducted, and then we get the income on hand. We have to pay taxes also, and then we get what we get, like, after, initially is after making all the of all the payments on hand, then what we, and then after paying the taxes, so we, what the net income that is there on our hand, that is what we called is disposable income, or YD. Higher is the disposable income, higher is the level of consumption. So as we said, that it's a C, which is consumption C, which is a function of YD, disposable income. That's a consumption function, and it's a behavioral function because it is actually explaining the behavior of consumers. And YD, as I said, is disposable income. Now, what is disposable income? That is the total income minus the tax that we pay, and then what we have on hand. So that's what is disposable income. Now, what also comes up is, can we go to the next slide? Okay. So now what we see is like when we talk of consumption, okay. So what happens is consumption of goods and services. Now, what happens if we don't have any income on hand? Say, our students, and students don't earn, then what will happen to them? How are they going to consume? No money. How are they going to consume? Like if they are not earning, but still they consume money, they will spend money either by borrowing from their parents, or they're given pocket money, or whatever way they're getting it. So and so what happens, what is this money needed for? This is needed for the basic necessities, which means like whether we earn or whether we do not earn, we will have to spend a certain amount for our basic necessities. That is there. So that is denoted by C0, or as we say, it is also called autonomous consumption. That is the consumption when income is zero. Like either when there's no income, we still borrow to buy our food. We need it. Without food, how do we survive? That's the first part. The second part is what we have is that depends on our income. So after that, after um, like basic needs are met, then it comes up that as we start earning, then we make all the necessary payments, and whatever money, that income that is there on hand, the disposable income, based on that we start spending money on other purposes, on other things. So C1 is also called marginal propensity to consume, that which is also called induced consumption. That is the percentage of extra income that is being spent. So in that, since the consumption function, so what do we see? It's C is equal to C0 plus C1 YD. C0 is the intercept, which is constant, which will always be there. Even if income is zero, means YD is zero. So C1 into YD becomes zero. So in that case, C is equal to C0. So that is why it's intercept, and which is there, constant. And C1 is propensity to consume. So with 1 unit increase in income, what will be the amount of consumption? So can we go to slide number 14, please? Yes. So if you see, this is how it's represented. That if you see consumption function, it doesn't start from zero because of the term C0. C0, even if income is zero, disposable income is zero, that means what happens? The C1 Y minus T becomes zero. So what happens? C is equal to C0. So there is a certain amount of consumption is always there. So consumption function will always start, the initial point is C0, and then it starts increasing. That's where it comes. And this is the, as we say, is a planned expenditure. This is our plan. This is how we plan our planned expenditure, or the demand. This is the demand that comes into play. Okay. So, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So what happens now in the, as I said, when I started the class, I just said that production is equal to, will be the, or in other words, producers will produce that amount of products or services for which there is a demand. So we are talking of demand side economics. So what happens? So that is why in the equilibrium in the goods market says production equal to demand for goods, not the other way around. Demand equal to production. You can always say why, what's the problem if we write y equal to z or z equal to y. Mathematically, if you write, it is okay, because but if you if you try to give an interpretation, then it's wrong. Production will be done, that amount of production will happen, that is y, which is which is based on the total amount of demand that is there at that moment in the economy. So y equal to z and not z equal to y. So z means which the total demand is the consumption, that is c0 plus c1. It's a function of y minus disposable income, means gross income minus tax, plus I, that is private investment, plus G, that is government expenditure. So, as I said, as long as there is demand, production will also keep on increasing till the point where demand equals production. That's the goods market equilibrium condition. Okay. So, next slide, please. Can we go to, yes, Keynesian cross? Now, what happens is, as a now the problem that was coming up, like as I said, Keynes, what Keynes had to say, like the problem that initially it was felt that whatever will be produced, it will be sold, right? But the problem came up during recession time, depressions, when there was the problem of demand was not there, so production was also, excess production was coming up. So how to handle such a situation, how to handle this? So that's where, so the Keynes actually came up with the solution, like they tried to analyze how to handle this situation. So this is what is called is Keynesian cross, which is, this is the Keynesian cross model, which tries to provide an insight into this problem of recessions and depressions, like how to handle such situation. So can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So this is the diagrammatic representation of the Keynesian cross. Now, if you see, we have something called planned expenditure and an actual expenditure. Planned expenditure is what we are talking about. Y is equal to C plus I plus G. What we plan to have it. Okay. And the actual expenditure is, which starts, it's a 45-degree line, that more, when zero income, no expenditure, as income starts increasing, that's how it goes. And this is the actual that's where it comes up, actual expenditure, that is coming from the suppliers producers point of view. Planned expenditure is from the demand point of view, the consumer's point of view, consumers or government expenditure or private investment. So private firms or government, they're planning what they plan to do, but the actual expenditure comes from the suppliers point of view, what the producers think. They have a prediction of their own. Now, what happens is, when planned expenditure is equal to actual expenditure, that's where we have the equilibrium income coming into equilibrium situation, and we have the equilibrium income coming into play. But for it, what happens is, let's suppose we have a situation where we talk of Y2, point Y2, where we see that the planned expenditure is more than the actual expenditure. Whatever the suppliers were planning, had planned, so but what they had actually manufactured it, so that is much lesser than what is the actual demand. So what happens? So when producers manufacture goods, or what happens, they do not manufacture, they keep a certain amount as inventory, they keep it. So here what happens, when their demand is much higher, so what happens, the inventory level starts going down, because more demand. So more demand means what? Income starts increasing. So they sell off, the producers will sell off their inventory, and the income starts increasing. So it starts growing, and then ultimately it comes to equilibrium situation. The other point, just the reverse, is where point where we talk of Y1, where the actual expenditure is much higher than the planned expenditure. Demand is lesser. Now, demand, when, so prediction of the producers is not accurate. So it starts, what happens up there is, there is a unplanned accumulation of inventory. So what happens as a result of that? Income starts going down, because people are not willing to spare, they don't want to buy such so much of goods. So demand is much less. So then what happens? Income starts going down again till it reaches the equilibrium situation. Uh, okay. So can we go to slide number 19, please? 18 is also similar. Yes. So if you see the equilibrium situation, y is equal to c0 plus, if we just break it up, c0 plus c1, y minus t plus I plus g. So if we just simplify it, what we see is y is equal to 1 by 1 minus c1 into c0 plus I plus g minus c1t. Now, c0 plus I plus g minus c1t is autonomous spending, which means C0, autonomous consumption, will happen. This consumption will take place whether there is income or not. I, that is investment, that is private investment, that will happen. That will always take place. Private firms will be investing. G, that is government spending, government expenditure, government is going to spend. So it has nothing to do with people's income. And tax C1T. So whenever income is there, you have to pay a tax. A certain amount goes in the tax. That's always there. So that's why it's autonomous spending. And 1 by 1 minus C1 is the multiplier that I was to Keynesian multiplier. So what happens is an increase of the autonomous spending by 1 unit increase of autonomous spending has an a huge impact on the equilibrium output. And what is the extent of increase of output? That is denoted by the multiplier 1 by 1 minus C1. Okay. Uh, so let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so let's see what happens when we talk of fiscal policy coming into play. Fiscal policy means we are talking of goods market. So we are talking of change any of these autonomous spending, that is change in tax or change in government expenditure or change in a private investment. What happens as a result if there is a change? How does it affect the equilibrium situation? So next slide. Yes. So suppose there is an increase in the government expenditure. So if there is an increase in the government expenditure, the planned expenditure line that goes up because increase. So when there's an increase, then what happens? Increases by delta G. That's the increase. So the equilibrium point starts shifting from point A to point B. So that's a new equilibrium line. So there's an increase in income. There's an increase in income from Y1 to Y2. So that increase is delta Y, Y2 minus Y1. That is denoted by delta Y. So so what happens? Increase in the government expenditure leads to an increase in the income, output and income. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is the other thing, effects of an increase of autonomous spending. When spending increases, then also the same thing comes up. The planned expenditure, it goes up, and then what happens is we have the income starts increasing, and we have a new equilibrium situation. Now, when what happens is in this case, if there is an increase in the tax, then it'll be a reverse situation. Because you pay more tax, so you have less money on hand, less income. So the planned expenditure goes down. Because if you look into the autonomous spending, it is C0, it's talking of C0 plus I plus G minus C1T tax. We are giving off. So the expenditure goes down, planned expenditure goes down, and the level of income starts going down. People have less money on hand, so they demand less, demand goes down, production is less, income is also less. So that's the reverse reverse happens. Okay. Now, how long would it actually take for output to adjust to come to equilibrium situation? It actually depends on how often, how the firms revise their production schedule and how often they revise their production schedule. So two things: how do the firms adjust, and how often do they do it? So this adjustment of output over time, as we say, this is also called the dynamics of adjustment. So what we can actually say, summarizing it, we can say in a nutshell, we can say that when there is an increase in demand, it leads to increase in production, which leads to ultimately increase in income. So the end result that comes up, so what happens is there's an increase in output that is that is of a greater extent than the initial increase in demand. And that ultimate increase in output, what is the total extent of that increase, that is denoted by what we say is the multiplier value. Okay. Can we go to slide number 25, please? Yes. So this is the next part of today's class, where we are talking of the IS curve. How do we derive IS curve from the goods market? So now, when we talk of goods market, we in the goods market, what did we talk about? We are talking about the amount of output that has to be produced, right? And from the IS curve, we derive the from the goods market, we derive the IS curve, which is a combination of interest rates and outputs, different combinations, which so that in a situation where the goods market is in equilibrium. So how do we derive it? So first of all, what is IS curve? IS curve is the relation between interest rate and output, relation between interest rate and output. And IS curve is downward sloping, which means there's an inverse relation between interest rate, that is I or R as we say, and Y. Can we go to slide number 28, please? Yes, if you see, this is how it looks like. Okay. Now, IS curve. Now, if let's go to the goods market equilibrium condition, where we know that Y is equal to Z, and we know Z is equal to C, which is a function of Y minus T. Next slide, if you can go to next slide. Yes, C minus T, C is a function of Y minus T plus I plus G. Now, all this while, we had taken as I as autonomous, right? So, but what happens is actually investment, this is investment by private firms. Investment, how much they are willing to invest. No business firms, however big they are, if nobody spends the entire amount of money from their own pockets. Nobody would do it. Whenever they are whatever may be the size of the firm, whenever they're going for investment of new projects, they are spending on on an existing project, they would be taking a loan from the banks, and banks are there to give that loan. Now, how much money will they actually borrow from the bank? That depends on the rate of interest. When the rate, that is cost of borrowing, when the cost of borrowing is high, investment is less because people are going to take less money. When income of a person, when you have more income on hand, more income, then investment, we invest more. So what happens, what I'm trying to say is investment depends on both income and rate of interest. So what when income is more, investment is higher. So income and investment are positively related. Whereas when rate of interest increases, That is cost of borrowing money is high. So when cost of borrowing is high, that means the operational cost will increase. So which means what? The profit for the producers will start decreasing. So what happens? Producers will take less interest in that project. So investment will fall. That's why investment and rate of interest are negatively related. So if you go to slide number 31, slide 31, please. Yes. So investment is not autonomous, but it's a function of income and, or let's not say income, let's say production and rate of interest. More is the product, or like there's more demand, more investment comes up. More production, more investment. So that's there. And more higher is the rate of interest, lower is the cost of borrowing. So higher is the cost of borrowing, so lower will be the investment. So it's y, I and y are positively related, and I and small I, that is rate of interest, are negatively related. Now next slide please. Yes. So if you see in the goods model, this is how we derive the IS curve. The first part of the top part of of the graph, that is where we are talking of the goods market equilibrium condition. Okay. Now what happens is, suppose there is the initial equilibrium situation which we see. It's up there, like when the interest rate is when the demand curve is, when we see the planned expenditure is ZZ, that is it. So the equilibrium is A and the equilibrium level of output is Y. Now what happens is, say the rate of interest increases. So what happens when the rate of interest increases? Less investment takes place. Less investment taking place means less production. Less production will happen. So we have the planned expenditure starts going down. And what happens? We see that the equilibrium condition shifts from A to A dash, and the level of output decreases from Y to Y dash. It goes down. So if we plot these points Y and Y dash in the bottom part of the graph, which is where we have output on the x-axis and rate of interest on the y-axis. So we plot point y at the rate of where the rate of interest is r, and then we plot the y dash when the rate of interest is r dash. So we plotted, we see that when the rate of interest is r higher, r dash, the output is less. So that's with, so we see that the IS curve is downward sloping. uh okay, we can just go to the next slide. It also shows the graph in a, yes, this is the same graph which we see that when rate of interest increases, expenditure decreases and the output decreases. So higher rate of interest means less output. So IS curve is downward sloping. Okay. Uh, right. So can we actually go go to slide number 36? Okay. So now what happens? We just saw, right, that when interest rate changes, investment changes, output changes. So that is what we are talking of IS curve, right? So how now what when we talk of fiscal policy, we will be coming to fiscal policy. So fiscal policy means what? When does the IS curve, when do we have changes? Changes comes up in the IS curve. It can come up due to tax. It can come up due to government spending. So what is this? These are fiscal policy. So it's nothing to do. I'm not talking of money. So these are the fiscal, like these are the tools which affects the fiscal policy. When fiscal policy, government makes fiscal policy, policy, changes in the fiscal policy, they take into consideration the factor G, the factor T, the factor I comes into play. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Now, what happens? How does it affect the IS curve? Suppose there's a increase in the tax. Now, when there is an increase in the tax means what? People have less income on hand, disposable income decreases, right? So disposable income decreases means what? Consumption level will also decrease. So when consumption level decreases means what? Less demand, less output. So the IS curve will shift to the left at the same rate of interest. Please keep that in mind. Interest rate has not changed. But at the same rate of interest, we have lesser output. So this is how we go about. If there was increase in the government expenditure, then what would have happened was the IS curve would have shifted to the right side. Okay. Uh, Now, can we go to slide number 40, please? Okay. So this is basically a summary of the the ice curve that we talk about. So we know that at goods market and ice curve. So in the equilibrium condition of the goods market, it says that what does it say in the equilibrium condition? That when there's an increase in the interest rate, output will decrease, and this is what this is denoted by a downward sloping curve, which is the IS curve. So IS curve is denoted from at the equilibrium condition of the goods market, when there's a change, like whereby when we see the effect of change in the interest rate on the output. Now, changes in factors that decrease the demand for goods given the interest rate. So we saw that when the tax increases, what happens? Given the interest rate, IS curve shifts to the left. But if there was a given the interest rate, if there was an increase in the government expenditure, or what will happen? Then the IS curve shifts to the right. So, and when there is a change in the fiscal policy, changes in the fiscal policy that actually increases the demand for goods and services, so that shifts the IS curve to the right side, and vice versa when it reduces when it leads to decrease in the demand for goods. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? This is the third part. Now we are coming into the money market coming into play. We're talking of goods production, demand, but without money, how is that possible? How are people going to buy if there's no money, if there's no money in the market? So that's where we come across, that's where we're talking about the financial market, and we will be also bringing in the talking about the importance of central bank, like their role in the money market. So next slide, please. And when we talk of the financial market, these are the things that we'll be discussing: demand for money, and then deriving the money demand and money supply equation, the equilibrium rate of interest, the LM relation, and monetary policy and open market operations. So uh now the first question that comes up is, right, uh demand. How much money would you want? Next slide, please. How much money would you want to have? What is the demand? When we say demand for money, how much money? How much money do we need? Huge amount of money, like infinite amount? No, right? So how much do we want to keep in the form of money, that is in the form of currency? That is determined by certain factors. Okay, so why? And that is we actually come across with that. Why? What is the motive for actually holding money in currency? Why do we want to hold money in currency? So can we have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yes. So there are three motives for this. First is that where we are talking of transaction motives. Now, this is money. People hold money to pay for their basic needs, goods and services that they want to buy, right? Then they need it. Transaction. So that's the first thing. Basic things. They would need it. Second comes up is people after spending their money on meeting their needs, daily needs, they would also, if they have money, they would also want to keep a certain amount of money for emergency or unplanned expenditure. Emergencies can be anything. It can be with medical situation. It could be like we had this, like anything can come up. Any emergency can come up. Nationwide emergencies are there. So we need money. We need. That is precautionary motives. So most people would first go for transaction. If you talk of the lower income group, they would go for the first transaction motives. Then, when we talk of the middle level group, middle income group, they would go for the first and the second. Now, those who are high income earners, then they would think of, okay, I do still have some extra money. Now, is there a possibility to invest in securities, bonds, or other types of financial assets, which would give them higher rate of interest? They can earn some income. They can earn out of it. So that's where it comes. It's called speculative. So that's where it comes up. So it that's where, and when we talk of speculative motive, that is people are not holding money on hand. They do not hold money on hand, they are investing the money. So when we talk of demand for money, it actually depends on what your needs are. And second comes up, if you want to, how much money you want to hold on hand and how much money you want to invest depends on the rate of interest. Rate of interest on bonds, on securities. If the rate of interest is high, people would want to invest more in securities and hold less money. So, can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Yes. So there is like my question is coming up is why can't we completely invest the money and hold nothing? No. Then what are we going to do for our day-to-day needs? What about the emergencies? And is there an opportunity cost of holding money? Yes, if we hold too much of money, then what happens? We miss out on the opportunity of investing in securities where there is a scope for us to earn some extra income. That opportunity cost is always there. So now when we talk, so what do we see this is when we talk of demand. Next slide, please. Mm, okay. So the demand, so when we are talking of money, we are talking of the demand for money. So actually we are talking of the amount of money that we want to hold in the form of cash at a given interest rate. That's the main thing. How much money do we want to hold in cash and how much money do we want to invest? It depends on the rate of interest, at a given rate of interest. And this rate of interest is the price for money, which means that if if interest rate is higher, people would want to invest more in bonds and other types of investment and less on hand. So demand for money decreases. When rate of interest is higher, demand for money is less. So demand for money curve or demand curve for money, that's why is downward sloping, which is shown in the next slide. Next slide, please. So that's where it comes up. Higher rate of interest means lower demand for money. That's where it comes up. So this is the demand curve. So what do we see? Now demand for money, when we talk of demand for money, it depends on two factors. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. One, as I said, first was how much income do we have on hand? How much income are we in the lower income group or middle income group or the higher income group, right? So higher is the level of income, higher will, so demand for money will be more because you need more for your expenditure for your day-to-day meal. Then you will not go for inferior quality products. We would want branded products. We would want superior quality products. So income, level of income, and demand for money are positively related or direct relation, whereas when that is demand for money is the income is denoted by y. Now L, the interest that we see, L is liquid, L stands for liquidity preference, and I is interest rate. Liquidity preference means the liquidity comes from cash. How much money would you want to hold in cash form, and how much would you want to invest? That depends on your rate of interest. So L is liquidity preference, and that's the function of rate of interest, and which is negatively related with the demand for money, as I said. So now what do we see is L is like when we are talking about no let me go we from here, actually this is the first step of denoting the LM curve. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yes. So in the equilibrium condition, money market equilibrium condition, what do we see is that the demand for money, it is downward sloping, whereas when we talk about the supply of money, money has to be there available in the market also. So supply of money, we'll go more in details about it. It's actually decided how much money would be there in the market. That is decided by the central bank. It has nothing to do with the rate of interest. So supply for money is a supply of money curve is a vertical line. It depends on the central bank how much they want to supply money, how much they would want to have money supply, or let's say the total amount of money circulation in the economy. How much would that be is decided by the central bank. So the intersection point of the demand and the money market is the money supply curve gives you the equilibrium condition in the money market. So now what happens is like when with every level of interest, at every level of interest, money demand, what happens at money demand increases when the income increases, as I said. So people would want to spend more with rise in income. And what happens when income increases, given the given the rate of interest, so demand for money curve will also shift to the right. So when it actually shifts to the right means what? Demand for money increases, people are willing to hold more money at that same rate of interest than what is available in the market. They are willing to hold more. That's what happens. So there is an excess demand for money happening at that time. So what happens as a result? I'll go a little later. I'll tell you. So next slide, please. I'll go to slide number 51, please. Slide number 51. Yes. So this is where we talk of theory of liquidity preference, right? This is exactly what I was talking to you. Is the supply and demand for money? It determines the rate of interest. Just a moment, please. Just a moment, please. Sorry about it. I had to take a glass of water, please. So sorry for it. So when we talk of the theory of liquidity preference, here what we actually talk about, as I was talking to you, like so how much money would be the supply, like how is it determined, like what will be the equilibrium rate of interest in the economy? That is determined by the supply and demand for real money balance, right? So this is the and This is how it goes about that, where we said the supply curve is horizontal, is vertical, because it is money supply curve. The quantity of money in circulation in the economy is determined by the central bank. It has nothing to do with the interest rate. Whereas when we talk of demand for money, that depends on the rate of interest on that is offered on investments. So can we go to the next slide, please? So we talk next, we comes across is the money supply. Now money supply means, as I said, supply of money is constant at a particular rate of interest. So that is denoted by M. And in the equilibrium condition of the money market, money supply is equal to money demand. Please keep it in mind, it's not money demand equal to money supply. It's money supply equal to money demand. That is, whatever will be the demand, that amount of money is in circulation. Central bank decides it. Central bank makes that decision. So money supply M is equal to money demand. As we know, it's a function Y and Li. Now M, the LM curve that we have, that comes from the equilibrium condition of the money market. L is the liquidity preference, L, as we see here, and from coming from the demand, money demand side, and M is the supply, money supply, that is supply of money. So LM, that's how we come across. So now what happens up here is, if you actually look in at any equilibrium situation, so we know that money demand is equal to money supply, right? And so what happens is that at this point, when we talk of the equilibrium situation, so whatever people are given income level, given the income level, people are willing to hold an equal amount of money, an amount of money which is equal to the existing supply. So that's the LM relation, where, as I said, L stands for liquidity, since money is the most liquid asset, and M is the money. Okay. Can we go to slide number 54, please? Yes. So, uh, how does central bank increase the money supply? I said that at any given rate of interest, like money supply doesn't depend on the rate of interest. So it is constantly determined by the LM curve. It's determined by the central bank. It's fixed, whatever, irrespective of whatever is the level of rate of interest. So how does, and when and it's a central bank which decides, looking into the the economic situation, whether there is a need for increase in the money supply, or whether there's a need for decrease in the money supply. So how, when, if the central bank decides to increase the money supply, how would they go about with it? There are different ways. One is simply printing of more money, which is not the first choice, definitely not the first choice of central banks, because increase printing of more money means excess money. Simply print means what? It leads to inflation. So what do they prefer to do? One is definitely looking into the reserve requirements, the cash reserve ratio that we talk about. So what happens when the reserve ratio goes down, reserve requirements, so banks are able to loan out more money. More money means more supply of money. That's how it goes. Secondly comes up with the interest rate. Now sometimes banks have to borrow, get to borrow from the central bank. When they borrow money from central bank at a lower rate, means what? They can have some money on hand, so they can actually what do? They in turn also reduce the cost of borrowing, the cost of loans to the customers. So lower interest rate means increase more borrowing, investment goes up, so more money, quantity of money in circulation goes up. Fourth thing, which is very common, is the open market operation, when a central bank is actually looking to increase the quantity of money in circulation. So what do? They would either purchase the government securities from the commercial banks. So they can do it to in if they want to increase the supply of money, they just buy the assets, buy the securities, government securities from the commercial banks, from the institutions. So in return, what happens? They have to pay the commercial banks so more money, so which is called a expansionary monetary policy or expansionary that's called expansionary monetary policy, where there's excess more money, supply of money. And the reverse comes up is when central bank wants to reduce the supply of money. In so what do? They sell the securities to the commercial banks, and the commercial banks have to pay. So the supply of money goes down, which is contractionary monetary policy, reduction in the supply of money. So now uh, can we actually go to slide number 57? Yes. So central bank is it's as I said has the full right to control the supply of money in the economy. So money supply, as I said, it's fixed by the central government, the policies of the central bank. Sorry, my mistake. Central bank. Fiscal policy is determined by the government, Ministry of Finance, under the government of the country, and in coordination in coordination with the Reserve Bank. They don't do it by themselves. And monetary policy is determined by the central bank of a country. So, so if you go to the next slide, slide number 58, so that's what we say that some money supply curve, as I said, is a vertical line. It doesn't depend on the rate of interest. If they want to increase, the central bank wants to increase the money supply, it just the supply curve, money supply curve just shifts to the right. At the same rate of interest, it just shifts to the right. Okay. So uh okay. Now what happens once the central bank decides the money supply in the economy, then the households and business, all the firms, then they can make their individual decisions regarding how much money to hold. So money market comes into equilibrium situation at a particular rate of interest when demand for money is equal to the fixed amount of money supply. That is, money supply is equal to money demand. Can we go to slide number 60, please? Okay. So if you see this, this is where we see point E. That is the equilibrium condition. Money supply equal to money demand, right? Now at a rate of interest which is 10%. So what happens? Suppose if the rate of interest is 12%, then what will happen? We see at that point that there is an excess supply of money. So they have so more money in circulation than what people actually demand, what they want to hold. So what happens? Excess supply in money means what will happen? What should the central bank do to ensure that people hold more money? Because why there is excess supply of money? Because why demand is less? Why? Because people have invested money in securities. So what do the banks do? They start reducing the rate of interest on the securities, on the bonds, on the securities, on the savings. So what happens? Now when you start earning less, then you don't want to invest, then you want to hold money. So the rate of interest goes down till people start holding more money, they sell off their assets and they start holding more money. So it goes on, the rate of interest goes down till it comes to equilibrium situation point E, where the money demand is equal to money supply. The reverse happens when the rate of interest is 8%, when the demand for money is more. So there's excess demand for money than what is in circulation. So people want to hold more money. There's no money is not there, but they want to hold money. So what should the banks do? What should they do? They would want people to invest in assets so that the demand for money goes down. So they start increasing the rate of interest. So the rate of interest on assets increases, so people are more interested to invest in assets. So the demand for money goes down. It goes down, that means the rate of interest starts increasing, demand for money goes down, it goes on till it reaches the rate of interest increases to 10%. That is the equilibrium condition. So that's how it actually goes about. Okay. Can we go to slide number 63, please? Okay. So next comes up is what would happen if there is an increase in income? How does it affect the interest rate? When income increases, now what happens? There's no shift in the money supply. The demand for money curve that shifts to the right. We know it's a positive relationship. Then demand for at the rate of interest, the initial equilibrium is A, point A, where the rate of interest is I. Now, when the money demand curve shifts to the right. So at the same rate of interest I, what do we see now? That there is excess demand for money. Excess demand for money means what? That there is no money is less in circulation, people want more money. So that means the rate of interest is so low that people don't want to invest in assets. So the bank starts increasing the rate of interest. So when they start increasing the rate of interest, people start demanding less money, they start investing in assets. So the rate of interest starts going up. From I, it goes up till it reaches I dash, where the demand for money starts decreasing and the equilibrium condition is new equilibrium is A dash, where demand for money is equal to supply of money. So what do we actually see which when we see in this case when the demand for money is more than some money supply, it means two things. Why the rate of interest is increasing? Because of two things. One, people want to hold more than the supply of money, that's why there's money demand. And they want to liquidate the savings and bonds because rate of interest is too less. They want to sell off their assets. That's why interest increases. Is and that leads, and so people start investing, gets interested to invest in savings bonds, and they decide to hold less money. And so we get a higher rate of interest, so we have more demand for money decreases, and then the people are we reach the new equilibrium situation. And vice versa is the case when money demand is less than money supply. Okay, can we go to slide number 67? Slide 67, please. Okay. So what happens when now comes up? Now we are talking of the money supply curve. What happens if there's an increase in money supply? How does it affect the interest rate? Now, initial equilibrium condition is point A, where the rate of interest is I, and M is the total amount of money, which is their money demand and money supply, if we say. Now, suppose the central bank increases the rate of the total amount of money. So, money supply increases. So, we see a shift of the money supply curve to the right. So, what happens? At the rate of interest I, we see that there is an excess supply of money. Excess supply of money. Why? Because people are not willing to hold money. The rate of interest on assets, investing in assets, is quite high. They would earn more. So they don't want to keep in cash the money. So what do banks do? They start decreasing the rate of interest so that people will sell off their assets and start holding money. So it goes down, rate of interest goes down till to I dash, where the new equilibrium point is A dash. So, can we go to slide number 69, please? 69. Yes. So from here we will derive the LM curve. If you see what happens, that when income increases, as we said, the money demand curve shifts to the right, and we saw the rate of interest also what is happening in that case. that we see the rate of interest is also increasing up here, right? So, which means when income increases, we have rate of interest also increasing. So, if we plot that on the right side of the diagram, rather on the part B, where rate of interest is plotted on the y-axis and income or output plotted on the x-axis, we see that LM curve is an upward rising curve. So this is LM curve. It summarizes the changes in the money market equilibrium. IS curve is downward sloping. LM curve is upward rising. So uh, now what happens is, like we know this, like once again, when the real income increases, demand for money is more. We have more demand for money, which means what? More spending more money than the money supply. What is there? So what happens to reduce the demand for money? The interest rate goes up. Interest rate going up means demand for money goes down till till the point where money demand is equal to money supply. Okay. Uh. Okay. So now, can we go to the slide number 71, which also shows the same thing? Like, can we go to slide 71? Yes. So if you see, it's the same thing, whatever I was saying, just in the previous graph. So it's the same thing. When income increases, we see that rate of interest is increasing also. That's why it's a upward rising uh, curve. LM curve is upward rising. Now, when money demand is fixed, now what happens? And the money supply increases. We know that the rate of money supply increases. Then what happens? If there is an X money supply increases means what? That there will be X. We just saw in our previous graph, like when we were talking about, if we go back to, can we go back to slide number 67 once again? Can we go back to slide 67 once again? Yes. So we saw that when money demand is constant and money supply increases, we saw what happened was that there was a decrease in the rate of interest, right? That's what we saw. So if we actually see this, if we try to plot it on in the LM curve, how it affects the LM curve. If we go to straight to slide number 72 once again. Yes, we saw that the LM curve, it shifts to the right, that is downward. Okay, so we see that there is a shift, reduce in the rate of interest goes down. Rate of interest goes down. That's what happens. Shifts downwards, the rate of interest goes down. So, so now, uh, so uh, let's go to a little more on the different on the monetary policy and the open market operations. Let's go to slide number 75. Yes. So a little more on open market operations, as I said. So this is a very famous and very popular mechanism by which is operated by the central banks, like buying and selling of bonds, right? So it's a very popular monetary policy tool where banks buy and sell bonds in order to regulate this money supply in the economy. And so it is done basically to either to increase the money supply or to remove the excess money in circulations. And it's open market because the selling happens. It's a open market operation, buying and selling. It's called open market. So now if we go to slide number 77. Slide number 70. Yes. So open market operations, right? Here, what happens is that two types of open market operations. One is when the central bank buys the bond. They are buying the bond means they're paying this commercial banks, so there is increase in money in the market. Commercial banks have more money on hand, which they can give as loans. to the investors. So what happens is, though it's called expansionary open market operations. So those who want to take loans, the private firms, they want to take loans. So that's how it comes about. And the reverse is when there is excess supply in the market, excess supply of currency in the market, and central bank wants to reduce the supply of money. So they would sell off the bond to the commercial banks, and the commercial banks has to pay. So which means what? The supply of money goes down, which is called contractionary open market operations. Um, okay, can we go to next slide, please? Okay, this is the last part of the class. That is, now we are going to put the actually ISLM together. That's what is called ISLM model. And from here we come across with monetary and fiscal policy. Now, before I go ahead with it, let me just tell you, when we talk of is, right, is curve, we said we derive from the goods market. So I just forgot to tell you, I stands for investment, S stands for savings. So goods market, what does it say? I equal to S. Investment is equal to savings. Whatever is your savings, investment depends upon the savings. So is, that's why we get is curve from the goods market. And LM, that is, L is liquidity and M is money. That comes up, it depends how much money on hand, that determines that how much money we want to invest in security. So LM, that comes from the money market. Okay. So, can we go straight away to slide number 80? 80, please. Slide 80. Okay. So, equilibrium of the goods and money market. That is where we call about is ISLM model, right? So, what do we now? We just have to please try to recollect what I just discussed with you. Now, from the IS market, IS curve, we had discussed that interest rate affects output. It has an effect on output through I, through the so R and R output Y is inversely related. And in the money market, output and interest, they are positively related through money demand. Okay. Now, if we put both the IS and LM relation together, IS from the IS relation, we have Y equal to CY minus T plus I, which is function of Y and I, and plus G. And from the money market, we see that money supply, which is M by P, real money supply, is equal to money demand, Y L I. Now, if we put, can we go to the next slide, please? If we put both the IS and LM relation together, we see the equilibrium, we can get the equilibrium condition in the ISLM market, where the equilibrium point is point A, with the equilibrium level of output is Y, and the rate of interest is I. So this is where we have it. Now, uh, now this is where we come across, when we are talking about the policies, the different policies that we have. Now, the fiscal policy and monetary policy. Now, that is determined from the ISLM model. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So when we talk of fiscal policy, there are three ways how we can go about with it. One is definitely with the shift of the IS curve. Second comes up is where we are talking of the aggregate demand. Aggregate demand happens. And third, it what we talk when we talk of fiscal policy, it definitely affects the aggregate demand curve, aggregate demand, not the aggregate supply. And the tools that we have is, as I said, G and T, government spending and tax. Now, on the other hand, when we talk of monetary policy, what happens? It affects the LM curve. We just saw that. And that's where we're talking of the money supply. It affects the money supply. And the different tools that is used is open market operations or base rate policy, or as we say MLR, policy rate or bank rate policy, CRR, SLR, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of other tools out there also. Uh, so can we go to the next slide, please? There's a typing error. Sorry about it. Now, when we talk of fiscal policy can be of two types: fiscal contraction and fiscal expansion. Fiscal contraction or consolidation is where we are the policy which tries to reduce the budget deficit. That is this G, that when we have that it's G should be less than T. Okay, I that was a typing error. It's G not greater than T. Reducing of budget deficit. So government expenditure should reduce. That is reduction in G or increase in tax. That would lead to decrease in the aggregate demand. Now, when we talk of just the opposite, reverse, is when we talk of fiscal expansion. That is a policy which increases the budget deficit with either increase in government expenditure or decrease in tax, which leads to an increase in the aggregate demand. So, how does it affect? What sort of effect it has on the goods market, financial market, equilibrium, output, and interest? But please keep it in mind that it's not that just because if there is a fiscal policy, a change in the fiscal policy, the money market doesn't get affected. Money market also gets affected. Thing is, the initial this change starts from the goods market, and then it goes down, it percolates down, the effect percolates down to the money market, it goes there. Reverse is the case. When we talk of change in monetary policy, it starts, the initiation point is at the money market, and then it percolates down to the goods market. So both, that's why fiscal and monetary policy goes hand in hand. That's why we are talking of ISLM model together. It's not, you cannot study in isolation, or government or the central bank cannot make policies just in isolation. They have to take into consideration. That's why I said when fiscal policies are made, government does take into consideration the suggestions from the central bank also. It has to go hand in hand. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Slide 84. Okay, so what happened? Let's talk of contractionary fiscal policy. That is, as I said, that there's an contractionary fiscal policy is either increase in government expenditure or increase in tax, decrease in government expenditure or increase in tax. Now, when there is an increase in the tax, so what happens? Tax, so IS curve in the ISLM model, the LM curve doesn't get affected. IS curve shifts to the left. When it shifts to the left, what do we see here? This is a diagrammatic representation. What happens? There's a decrease in the output, equilibrium output, and what do we also have is a decrease in the interest rate. So why is this? What's the logic behind this? Now, when income decreases, when you have sorry, not income, but output decreases, what happens? Output decreases. So what do we see? That there is a, when, let's go it in a more detailed way. When tax increases means the disposable income goes down. You have less money on hand, so consumption goes down, demand goes down, production goes down, so income goes down. So when income goes down, then what happens? It's a cyclical process. Consumption also goes down, demand goes down, production goes down, output goes down. So when, what happens as a result? Investment also goes down. So investment goes down. Okay. Now when investment goes down, so what happens as a result? When investment goes down, then what happens? The what we find here is like a when initially when the investment is going down, so then what we actually need to ensure that uh, investment going down means that rate of interest, rate of it means but this investment, when it goes down, investment goes down because it's a rate of interest at this time is kept as fixed in the, so but because of investment actually going down, investment going down means what happens is also that demand, when it results, if you see in this diagram, that the demand for money is also going down. Demand for money is going down, and demand for money goes down means what? Demand for money goes down means this means at this time the rate of interest is quite high, That's why people don't. Now we are going into the money market because of decrease in income, demand for, up to the decrease in income, decrease in investment. So what happens here? This was goods market. Now what happens in the money market is because there's a decrease in income, we know demand for money and income, they are positively related. So income going down in the money market, what happens? Demand for money goes down. Why demand for money goes down? Because people are holding holding more assets. They're holding more assets. So because the rate of interest is quite high, rate of interest of investing is high. So what happens as a result? So rate of they would the banks would start reducing the rate of interest so that people hold more money. Now when rate of interest goes down, that affects the goods market. It also means rate of interest going down means two things, that you are encouraging people to hold more money, sell off the assets. On the other hand, you are encouraging the the firms to borrow more loans because they will be borrowing it at a lower rate of interest. Cost of borrowing goes down, so investment will go up. So initially, how it goes about is that's why I increases, capital I ultimately increases. So we see that the initial stage, it starts from the goods market with tax increase. Can you go to the next slide, please? The detailed explanation is there. Yes. So it starts from the goods market with tax increase, less disposable income, less consumption, less demand, less production, less income. So the cyclical process goes down. Less income, output, less investment. Now, where capital I decreases, then we go to money market. Income decreases means what happens? Demand for money decreases, means people are holding more assets. So central banks, the banks will actually reduce the rate of interest to ensure people hold more money, to ensure money market comes to equilibrium. Now, how does it affect the goods market? If you go to the last line of the last in the table, it says last relation, when rate of interest decreases, it also encourages the private firms to go for more investment because cost of borrowing decreases. So investment goes up. This is how it works. Increase in tax leads to increase in private investment. This is contractionary fiscal policy. So what happens? What do we see actually? That initially we see that investment is decreasing in the goods market. Why decrease leads to high decrease. But at the last, what do we see? Rate of interest decreasing means investment is increasing. So investment first decreases, then it increases. So what will be the net change? Will That is uncertain. That we do not know. It depends. What is the extent of fall and what is the extent of increase? Okay. Can we go to slide number 87? And this is a reverse. Reverse happens when we have expansionary fiscal policy. Can we go to slide 87, please? Yes. Now we come to monetary policy. Now, monetary policy again can be of two types. One is monetary contraction or tightening. That is where it leads to reduction in money supply and increase in interest rate, or monetary expansion where it leads to increase in money supply, where it leads sorry the monetary contraction is decrease in money supply and increase in interest rate, and monetary expansion is increase in money supply leading to higher output and lower interest rate. Now, the tools, as we said, we have open market operations, CRR, then we have bank rate policy, we have the minimum lending rate. All these things are there. So let's take up the case of effect of an increase in money supply. So can we go to the slide number 88, please? Slide 88. Yes. So what happens when there's an increase in the money supply? So then we know the LM curve shifts to the right. It shifts to the right, and so we have the new equilibrium condition point as A dash. So what happens here? The rate of interest is going down. Now, rate of interest going down means what? Rate of interest goes down means cost of borrowing becomes cheaper. It's much lesser. Sorry. So investment goes up. Investment going up means output increases. That's why I decreases, but Y increases. So that's what happens is, like, here what is exactly happen when you have an increase in money supply. So what happens that there is excess of money supply. So what is people, why excess of money supply? Because people prefer to hold bonds. People prefer to hold bonds means what? Demand for bonds are because the rate interest on bonds is higher. So there's an upward pressure on the price of bonds. Now, when there's an upward pressure, we know bonds and rate of interest are inversely related. When bond price goes up, rate of interest goes down. Now, when rate of interest goes down, so this is if you go to the next slide, please. Yes. So the rate of interest goes down. So this is up till that point is money market. So now the goods market gets affected. When the rate of interest goes down means what? Cost of borrowing starts going down. So private firms would borrow more money. So investment goes up. Investment goes up means the production happens, income goes up. So what happens? And it's a cyclical process. More demand, more income, more production, more income. So it just goes on. So which means what? So more income means more consumption, more consumption. So it goes on. So what happens is more income means again, on the other hand, demand for money goes up because more income, more demand for money means what? Demand for money going up means there's excess demand for money. Money is so supply is limited. So what happens? Banks would start increasing the rate of interest so that people will start investing in bonds, and they would not want to hold money. Now it affects the goods market also because rate of interest going up means what? That cost of borrowing goes higher. So people are not willing to go for investment, that is firms. So private investment I starts decreasing. So you see this, it started from the money market, it went up to goods market, and it again affects, well, like it's affecting both the money and the goods market. So that's where it is. That's why I said it cannot be studied in isolation. And reverse is the case when we have the contractionary monetary policy. Can we just go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this is the chart which actually tells you like what is the effect of fiscal and monetary policy when any of these tools gets changing, like tax increase or decrease of tax, increase or decrease in spending, increase or decrease of money. So on IS curve, on LN curve, on output and interest rate. So this is in a nutshell whatever I was talking to you. Okay, can we go to next slide? Slide number 91. Okay, this is where we are talking now fiscal policy and crowding out. Okay, now what happens up here is when we talk of crowding out, we are talking of expansionary fiscal policy. Expansionary fiscal policy, as you can see, that is increase in government expenditure. Okay, how much is the increase in government expenditure? On the graph, you can see it's by delta G, which is into the multiplier amount 1 by 1 minus MPC, marginal propensity to consume. So when government expenditure increases, now what happens? At the same rate of interest, R1, it increases, the income would increase, equilibrium point would increase from point E to point K. So it would increase. That's the initial thing. IS curve shifts to the right, IS1 becomes IS2, LM curve, there's no effect on it. So the equilibrium point, it increases, shifts. So it's a huge amount of increase in income. But what happens as a result of that when there is an increase in income? Okay, so we know that we have studied in our fiscal policy when we were talking about expansionary fiscal policy, we saw that interest rate increases. We just studied in if we look into the slide, also the previous slide, we saw that when there is a the increase in the government spending, so what happens is rate of interest actually goes up. So if you see the previous slide, that is 90, where I've put everything on a. Can you go back to slide number 90, please? Yes. If you see the third one, third row, where increase in spending, that is government spending, so rate of interest goes up, right? So rate of interest goes up. Now, when rate of interest goes up, now you can please go back to slide number 91. Can we return to slide number 91, please? Yes. So when the rate of interest starts going up, so what do we see? Rate of interest goes up and to R2. So what happens? Then we see it's the rate of interest going up means what? That invest cost of borrowing goes down, goes up. Sorry, my mistake. Cost of borrowing goes up. So private investors, those who want to take loans for projects, for the different business projects, they would start reducing, they would won't be so much interested to borrow money. So private spending or investment will go down, and ultimately the new equilibrium position will be at point b. So the invest the total there will be an increase in income, but not of the full extent. It's not from E to K, but it's from E to B. So when we say crowding out, it means when there is an increase in government spending, it crowds out. Crowds out means it dominates, it eats off, it has a negative effect, crowds out, negative effect on the investment spending. So it reduces the investment, the private spending goes down because of increase in government expenditure. This is called as crowding out effect. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Okay. So fiscal multiplier. Now this is a formula. This change in national income by change in spending. Now changing spending could be either, as I said, there could be consumption or private investment or government expenditure, or on exports also comes up. And initial change in aggregate demand, it causes a change in the GDP or output, that we know that is a multiple of initial change. That was what I was talking to you at the very beginning when we started the class today. Now this is I have a numerical for you all also. The initial, suppose the initial government spending is 10 billion, right? $10 billion is there. So initially what happens? So the GDP or the national income will increase obviously by $10 billion. Now if NPS, that is marginal propensity to save, to if for sorry, let's talk of consumption. The MPC, that is marginal propensity to consume, is zero point 0.9. That is, people spend 90% of the income. So that means what? MPS is what? Marginal propensity to save is 1 minus MPC, that is 1 minus 0.9, that is zero point 0.1. So the multiplier we know is 1 by 1 minus MPC, which is 10 times. So what will be the total amount of output, increase in output? That is 10 billion into 10. So it's 10 times $100 billion. That's how it comes up. Now, let's go with another example of it. Suppose initial demand, like the initial demand that we say is $400 million. Now marginal propensity to save, that is zero point 0.2. Now what we have is marginal rate of tax on income is zero point 0.2. Marginal propensity to import, that is MPI, is zero point 0.3. So what will be the multiplier value in this case? Initially, when we did not have in the previous example, can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Oh, okay. No, 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 no. I'm sorry. Yeah, the previous slide. Previous slide. Sorry. Yes. So initially, the previous example we were talking about, we didn't talk of MRT, we didn't talk of MPI. So we just took MPS. Now here we have MRT, MPI also. So the multiplier value will be 1 by MPS plus MRT plus MPI, so which gives 1.43. And the same calculation, what will be the final rise will be 1.400 into 1.43 times. That is 572 billion dollars. So that's a huge amount. That's what I said. One uh, when when there's a change in income by 1 unit, it has a huge amount of effect, final effect on the final output, and and the effect, the effect of change. What is the extent of change that is denoted by the multiplier value? So that's where it comes up. Now, can we go to the next slide? Slide 94. Okay, so policy mix. Now this is where I was talking to you at the beginning. Also, I said between the classes. Also, I said that what happens is fiscal policy and monetary policy cannot occur in isolation. It has to operate together. So, which is also called the fiscal monetary policy mix, or simply as we say policy mix, where there's a combination of fiscal and policy on fiscal and monetary policy, and it has the consequences. We just saw when we spoke about expansionary fiscal policy how it started, the initiation started at the goods market, and it affected, the effect goes percolates down to the money market and back to goods market. Similar is the case when we spoke about expansionary monetary policy, where it started with the initiation is in the the money market, it goes to goods market and then affects the money market also back again. So that's how it goes about. So now the main challenge for the government is to have the right kind of policy mix to achieve certain objectives. One, what could be these objectives? One is increasing output without change in interest rate. That could be the case. Second could be that to reduce the budget deficit, but without decreasing the level of output and or increasing the level of unemployment without changing it. And the third is sometimes central banks want to they want to keep the interest rate constant but reduce the output. So it depends what is the objective. Now, if we go to the next slide, what kind of policies can be used? Yes. So first we had identified three cases. Now when we talk of increase in output without change in interest rate, the policy mix will be combination of expansionary fiscal policy and expansionary monetary policy. When the objective of the government is to reduce the budget deficit without causing a decline in output and an increase in unemployment, then it's best to go for contractionary fiscal policy and expansionary monetary policy. And finally, if central bank wants to keep the interest rate constant and reduce the output, then they should opt for contractionary fiscal policy as well as contractionary monetary policy. Uh, and you can go to the next slide. Yes. So these are the references um, to, that I actually referred to for this presentation. So that's it from my side. So over to you, Raunak. Raunak, are you there?
Technical issues. So thank you very much, ma'am, for your nice presentations and lucid explanation. May this session may be helpful to our students of semester 5. Thank you, ma'am. Good night to all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.